Well, now joining me to discuss the junior doctor's case is Dr. Moosa Qureshi, who's a junior doctor working in haematology. Welcome to the programme.
Thank you.
Just rehearse for us briefly, if you could. What is the junior doctor's case against these contracts?
So, the actual contracts arose because the government made a manifesto pledge in the last general election in order to win votes that they would expand the NHS and stretch it from 5 days to 7 days. Understandably, having made that election pledge and having been voted into office, they're very keen to fulfil it. But the problem is that they're trying to fulfil it with no extra cash, no extra doctors, no extra resources. And if they do that, then the NHS will collapse.
So just for clarity, and I think this has been a subject of some discussion all the way through the dispute, for most people the NHS is 7 days a week. If I'm ill at the weekend and I walk into my local hospital, I get seen by a doctor. So what is the government on about when it says it wants a 7-day NHS?
So the current system, which actually has worked quite well, is that from Monday to Friday you have a full range of services. So if you want to have routine scans, imaging, routine investigations, you want to go and be seen in an outpatient's clinic, then that's all possible Monday to Friday. Saturday to Sunday, if you're sick, you'll be attended to. If you're in a sort of life-critical condition, then your life will be saved and safeguarded. But what the government appears to want to do is to stretch the Monday to Friday services across to Saturday and Sunday.
So so-called elective services.
Exactly. But they're trying to do this with no additional resources. So that is simply not possible. And what it will do is that it will probably end up in the resulting degradation of the services from Monday to Friday, and possibly a serious impact on the NHS as a whole.
So, in effect, what it might do is to make the most serious and the most urgent cases less well attended to, in favour of dealing with less serious and less urgent cases over a 7-day period.
Well, exactly. The risk is that you'll have a whole host of extra doctors on Saturday to Sunday, pulled away from the Monday to Friday, and they'll be not needed really. They'll be sort of distributed in a way that isn't efficient and doesn't work to the advantage of patients.
Okay, so tell us about this court case then, going on today, going on tomorrow. What is the hope here of the junior doctors? How can a court intervene between the government, which runs the NHS, and the doctors who work in it to say what the employers are doing is wrong here? How does that work?
So it all sort of boils down to a piece of legislation called the Health and Social Care Act, which effectively says that NHS services should be more independent, and it limits the powers of the Health Secretary. What this Act specifically says is that a large percentage of the NHS, which is the NHS Foundation Trust, cannot be issued directions by the Health Secretary. And what the 5 doctors who are bringing this court case independently in Justice for Health are arguing is that this has all come from Jeremy Hunt, from the Health Secretary. He's trying to impose this, and legally, according to that piece of legislation, he's not allowed to do that.
So is this a sort of backdoor way of denationalising the National Health Service, in a sense that we've always regarded this as a publicly provided, government-provided National Health Service, and this is chipping away at that?
Well, it is of concern that in the last few years, the private sector investment in the NHS has gone up from about £4 billion to £8 billion, which is a modest percentage of the overall NHS budget, but it's a doubling in a matter of a few years. One of the questions is whether this is part of a larger strategy to end up privatising the NHS, which of course would be disastrous for the majority of the population of this country.
So is the fear that once the government has said, OK, these trusts, we no longer have this power over them, they're kind of independent of us, the trusts then perhaps ratchet up the amount of private contracts, and the government says, oh, not our fault?
Yeah, it could be something like that. This is all sort of going quite far into hypothesising what are the motivations of the government. I'm more interested really in the fact that just by this contract, specifically by this contract, you will have an immediate effect of redistributing the workforce in an inefficient way, which will lead to a serious impact on the welfare of patients.
So if the court rules in your favour, will that immediately halt the contract, or will it immediately halt a larger process of sort of disengaging the government from the hospital trusts?
The problem with with this strategy really is that the health secretary, if he behaves in an ethical manner, then it should halt it. But what the health secretary could simply say is that, okay, I'm not allowed to impose it, but I'll get one of my colleagues who is an ally in the NHS, such as the chief executive of NHS Employers, Danny Mortimer, he'll impose it. And then legally you couldn't stop that happening. And then the question is really whether the media put a focus on that the judge has said that what the health secretary is doing is illegal, and he's just kind of he's just sidestepped what the judge has said.
So it might make it, if you like, politically impossible for him to do it, even if it weren't literally legally impossible.
Exactly. That would be the hope. It would have a huge political impact if we were to win this case.
Okay, and your feeling about this? I mean, we won't hold you to it, but do you think the case is likely to go your way, or do you think the judge will fall in line with the government?
Judges don't really fall in line with government, so I really trust in the independence of the judiciary. I have a background in law previous to studying medicine. Judicial reviews are very special cases seen by very senior judges who really know what they're doing. I've looked at in quite a lot of detail the legal arguments. They've got a top group of lawyers supporting them, and I'm reasonably hopeful that they've got a reasonable chance of winning this.
Okay, so if it won, would that mean that the strikes that are planned, the 5-day strikes that are planned, would they still be necessary, or you'd have to wait to see what the government's response to the legal decision was?
We would have to see what the government's response was. We would hope that the government would really come to its senses in that situation. As I'm sure you're aware, strikes for a doctor, I mean, most of us, probably all of us, went into medicine with the idea that we wanted to spend our lives helping patients, and that's what we do. That's day in, day out. Politicians do what they do. Doctors look after patients and care for them. And so striking for us is incredibly difficult, and we're trying to do everything we possibly can to avoid that.
And looking forward now a little bit, you've got a new organisation, haven't you, that's meant to help campaign around this. Tell us a bit about that.
Yeah, so a small group of doctors have formed Junior Doctors Alliance, and the reason we really formed it was because other groups, such as Justice for Health, have managed to crowdfund and finance lawyers who are really expert professionals to help them in their cases, and that's really done a great deal of good, because doctors, at the end of the day, we're reasonably intelligent, we're reasonably educated, but we're trained, as I said, to look after patients, not to do politics, not to do law, and so on. The media, for some reason, possibly because of the government's propaganda machine, have in general sided with the government, I feel, and given junior doctors quite a hard time. So our group has basically decided we're going to try and establish a cohesive, coherent and unified media response. And if possible, if we're able to raise enough funds through our crowdfunding website, to employ professional expert public relations teams to help us with this.
Okay. And how far have you got?
So far, we've just started. We've been going for about 24, 48 hours. We've managed to raise about £5,000 so far. But we're very hopeful that things will pick up soon with increased exposure.
Okay. Well, let's talk a little bit about the sort of wider impact of the junior doctors' dispute. I've heard many junior doctors say that they think that this is the kind of thin end of the wedge, that if the junior doctors are beaten by the government, that we will, in pretty short order, begin to see a transformation of the NHS away from its founding principles of being a public-provided service free at the point of need.
Yes, that's our main concern. If the junior doctors are beaten on this, then we really fear that next will be the consultants, because their contract is up for review after that, and after the consultants, then it will be the nurses and so on, and eventually the NHS will just be completely degraded.
How far is that? I mean, you told me how far the process of kind of outsourcing to private companies had gone. You said it's doubled, still a small proportion overall. But as in other areas of public service, has the sort of creation of sort of autonomous centres of management, has that gone very far? Because many people regard that, in other areas at least, as a kind of semi-privatised, or an internal market, as they put it. Is that happening in the NHS?
It really depends how you define privatisation. So there are a lot of sort of peripheral clinics that have been taken up by private companies such as Virgin Healthcare. And then there's also a fairly long history which dates back to the Labour government of the private finance initiatives, which really has been disastrous in terms of the long-term debt that's been incurred by NHS hospitals. But it's progressed gradually in quite an insidious way. So far, the main bulk of the NHS, which is, for instance, the large hospitals, have remained untouched. But if they were able to manipulate junior doctors' contracts and then consultants' contracts and nursing contracts, they could try to make those contracts much cheaper, effectively, for private companies, but at the same time, not so safe for patients.
And just final word then, just because you mentioned those PFI initiatives, and many people regard this as one of the biggest single threats or damage that's been done to the NHS. It really overloaded the hospitals with debt they can't repay. Is that the gist of it?
Yes.
And for what? What was supposed to be the point?
The point really was that it was a short-term game where you got some brand new beautiful hospitals and you didn't have to put much money into them because private companies were building them. But
so it's a bit like student debt.
Exactly.
You get a quick hit and then you're paying for it forever.
Exactly.
Okay, Dr. Moosa Qureshi, thanks very much for coming in and talking to us, but I'm afraid that's all we've got time for in this part of the programme. Do join us for the final part of the show. We'll be looking at